The superterrestrial hypothesis just posits a superdimensional component of biology. This allows us for the first time to think about UFOs more elegantly, as a higher form of wildlife, relating them to the known framework of organisms and ecosystems, where they properly belong.
We kept looking up, and it was there, and if we would go faster, it would go faster. If we would slow down, it would slow down.
And finally, my wife became very upset. She said, I must stop the car again. Look, right overhead. There was absolutely no sound associated with this object.
Instantaneous acceleration.
Oh, is that?
Hypersonic velocity. Last but not least, in the vernacular, would be anti-gravity.
Reports and depictions of UFOs, unknown flying objects, are so old they actually predate the historical record maintained since the invention of writing. We may find them ever since humans began depicting things in the first place, with art, scattered throughout the pictographic and petroglyphic caves of the Stone Age tribes. In the caves of Neo, France, the disc-like objects are conspicuously painted amongst the more usual spear-wielding hunters and crude animal glyphs found there. The pictographs of the Grotte des Neo, located in southwestern France, date back to the Magdalenian period of the Upper Paleolithic, some 13,000 to 14,000 years ago. The charcoal used in the artwork found scattered throughout the system are ideal for radiocarbon dating due to their organic nature and undisturbed condition, allowing for precise measurements of age. Older still may be the pictographs found in the Kondoa rock art sites of Tanzania, Africa. Many estimates suggest these crude drawings to be as many as 10,000 years old. Here, the discs have been drawn in one depiction, and in another, figures seem to surround and capture a human female, while their comrades look on above them, sitting in what appears to be a craft in some crude boxy representation. Older still are the pictographs found in the caves of Pechemel, near Cabarets, in the Lot Valley of France. This cave system houses some remarkable pictographs that date back to as much as 29,000 years ago, and is considered one of the best and most well-preserved sites of prehistoric cave art. Lesser known is the fact that amongst its over 70 representations of landscapes and wildlife, there are a series of disc-like flying objects hovering, apparently, over a strange human-like figure, just as in the case of the other rock art sites. These glyphs are completely incongruent with the more predictable pictographs surrounding them. Amongst other notable examples are the caves of Valcamonica, Italy, where there are depicted two strange figures in what appear to be spacesuits holding strange tools. A similar-looking spacesuit seems apparent in the small rock carving known as the Headless Rocket Man, which is stored in the Istanbul Archaeology Museum in Turkey. Though there is still debate over its intended representation, the object itself may be as much as 5,000 years old. In the Kimberley Caves of the Australian outback, Aborigine cave art frequently depicts small white beings with large black eyes, the so-called Wajinda. Aboriginal myths are pervasive with the imagery of these sky beings, or spirits of the cloud. And in Ecuador, near the border to Bolivia, small, 25-centimeter ceramic statues appear to depict men in spacesuits, nearly 3,000 years ago, just as old as the Aborigine art in the Kimberley Caves. Similar statues from Mexico and areas of South America depict the same human-like figures wearing helmeted spacesuits. One of the most impressive examples of this presents itself to us from high in the deserts of Peru, in the Colcha Valley of Toro Muerto. There, one may find the petroglyphic sites of Toro Muerto, an extremely isolated location strewn with the volcanic boulders of nearby Chachani and Corapuna, many of which are adorned with the rock carvings of the ancient Wari people. Although the actual origin of the carvings are unknown, archaeologists have documented thousands of well-preserved petroglyphs carved into nearly 5,000 volcanic rocks, making Toro Muerto one of the largest collections of petroglyphs in the world. Beyond the clear depictions of hippopotamus and rhinoceros, animals found only in Africa, investigations of the carvings have revealed something even stranger. Carved into some of the rocks, and estimated to be nearly 11,000 years old, are depictions of human-like figures wearing spacesuits equipped with antennae. As humanity settled into the ease and comforts of the later Stone Age, their Neolithic way of life finally afforded to them the luxury of art. It wasn't long before the mysterious sky people would appear amongst the paintings, weavings, and sculptures of emerging civilization, along with their oddly shaped craft. Since most of the art of this period was commissioned by religious enterprises, it's not surprising that early examples typically fall under its umbrella. In one of the earliest cases, from around 800 AD, the ancient Buddhist murals of Turpan, Xinjiang, China, feature the flying discs, replete with human figures perched atop them. Constructed during the final days of the Christianization of Europe, between 1120 to 1149 AD, in the town of Beaune in eastern France, sits the Notre Dame Basilica de Beaune. Inside, besides numerous frescoes dating from the 15th to 18th centuries, and a Black Madonna from the 12th century, there exists a collection of remarkable 15th century Tourney tapestries depicting scenes from the life of Mary. While they are all mesmerizing and worthwhile pieces, two in particular tend to raise the eyebrows of the attentive viewer. The tapestries located at this beautiful little church are called The Life of the Virgin Mary and Magnificat. They were completed around the year 1330, and upon them there are depicted not only the usual representations of the tribulations of Jesus' mythical earthly mother, but also, apparently, her association to the most unearthly objects ever, flying saucers. For above her, in both tapestries, hovering in the skies above the castle, there has been woven with silk and cotton many round disc-like domed objects. Although the depiction is nearly 700 years old, we identify these objects today, quite unmistakably, as flying saucers. It is for this reason, obviously, that these tapestries are not more commonly advertised to visiting Christian tourists, and few outside France even know of their existence, surviving 1 century after the next in this tiny, ancient church. These are far from the only artistic depictions of flying saucers. One such piece sits in the Bavarian National Museum in Munich, Germany. Crafted in Bruges in 1538, it is called the Sky of Summer's Triumph. It is well named, for the scene it portrays evokes precisely that vibe. 2 lovebirds amble in the foreground, as a procession of men and women bearing the many fruits of a plentiful summer's bounty march past. But while the commoners dance and imbibe, and toil in the fields and hillsides that occupy the background, the lady, in her cart, points frantically towards the sky, for above them, hovering ominously, there are no less than 5 of the flying discs. 3 are quite visible, while the 3rd hides behind a tree, and the 4th obscured mostly by words and the wreath held by the peasants who dance atop the cart. It's a notable piece due to the conspicuous number of objects, and since the unearthly nature of the objects are clearly noted within the scene itself. Furthermore, it appears that only the noble lady and her guard appear concerned about the objects, the commoners nearby lost rather obliviously in their enjoyment of summer. A similar juxtaposition is portrayed between the commoners and the nobility in another fascinating drawing found within the French book Le Livre des Baumeaux by Jacques Legrand, located at the Musée Condé in Chantilly, France. There exists a bizarre drawing that features a noble lady engaging with the concerned citizenry as a large golden sphere looms over them. While there are some who still insist, impossibly, that the drawing merely depicts a balloon, it's worth noting that such large balloons had not been invented in France in 1338. This would be achieved only 445 years later, when in 1783, the Montgolfier brothers launched the first unmanned hot air balloon from Annonay, France. In fact, by some, this event is considered the dawn of modern human aviation, a subject we will soon return to with great earnest. For now, let's linger in the past, where we might discover even more remarkable examples of UFOs reported by the process of artistic depiction. A breathtaking example is housed in the Visaci Dechani Monastery in Kosovo, Yugoslavia. There, among the many frescoes that adorn the interior, exists a fresco famous for its depiction of what we can only describe today as spacecraft. It's called the Crucifixion. and in it 2 figures may be seen, seated within the spacecraft, located at the top right and top left of the fresco. They are both equally engaged with the unseen control mechanisms of their craft. The one in the lead is undoubtedly looking back towards the other, which follows close behind. A bright orange blaze burns off the trailing craft, and its transparency, appearing as flame, seems to indicate its greater velocity. This suggests that it is because of the lead craft's slowed, perhaps even stationary status, to assumedly allow its pilot to look behind it, that creates its non-transparent, plainly observable condition. The craft is painted a crisp white, upon the white of its hull, and quite literally upon it, as opposed to the wall it is painted on, is painted with obvious perspective an 8-pointed star-like insignia. Its pilot sits before what appears to be a holographic display bearing a modern and familiar targeting pattern. He is not turned in body to see the other craft. Rather, his head is twisted around unbelievably, so that it faces perfectly behind him. The angels appear to witness this scene in the sky and react by covering their eyes and ears in consternation. Of course, it was called the Dark Ages for a reason, and not all medieval artists enjoyed the liberty of such open expression, especially as the darkness climaxed just before the Renaissance in the 14th and 15th centuries. This may be precisely the case in the work of Piero della Francesca, whose conspicuously placed lenticular clouds appear, to many, as cleverly disguised saucers throughout his paintings. In his 1450 Baptism of Christ, one such cloud looms in the sky. Other creative substitutes have also been used during this period. In the 15th century painting, The Madonna, with Saint Giovannino by Domenico Ghirlandaio, small disc-shaped objects are visible over Mary's right shoulder. Ringed in gold, closer inspection reveals them to be covered in green grass, a little circular flying piece of earth, apparently. Below, a shepherd and his dog look up at it, seemingly just as puzzled as we are. The piece is housed in the Palazzo Vecchio in Florence, Italy. Another conspicuous painting is called The Baptism of Christ by Flemish artist Ert de Gelder. It was painted in 1710 and hangs in the Fitzwilliam Museum. A disc-shaped object hovers high above, shining beams of light through a dove and onto John the Baptist and Jesus. One of the most poignant examples of discs in medieval art comes from a 16th century fresco in the lone monastery of Sighișoara, Romania. The church itself dates back to the 13th century, but only the foundation survived a 16th century fire that led to the painting of the frescoes seen there today. Within the fresco, the monastery's fiery destruction is depicted, while what is unmistakably a flying disc hovers just above. It emits flames as though it too were on fire. Below, a caption in Latin reads, "Israel, put your hope in the Lord." Though the painters and weavers of these paintings, frescoes, and tapestries could have never discerned it by their own religious hypotheses, as we do today, the actual, vehicular nature of these objects, they remained, mostly, true in their depictions of them. We see this today with the benefit of hindsight, i.e. science, and the tool of photography it bequeathed. Today, we are able to see them for what they likely are, spacecraft, occupied not by gods, but piloted by some human-like creature whose similarity to us demands explanation, not deification. Using science, not religion, or supposed spirituality, as our guide, we can discern the reason for our similar morphology to these pilots by the same method we have found that explains our similarity to the primates and other creatures of our own planet, the evolutionary theory of biology. This shall be our sacred and secular task in the procession of discovery that constitutes the pages of this book. We'll seek a modern, superdimensional ecosystem that might follow from a geometrically sensible, superdimensional physics, such that the phenomenon depicted by these religious artists follow from Darwin's theory of life. Thus we might understand it, perhaps not even for the first time, the scientific way.